So that shows the influx of people from foreign countries which are coming in, and it's always changing. The population of people from foreign countries that come to London is always growing. It's always growing. It's very multinational. Religion. According to the 2011 census, less than half of London residents are Christian. The rest are either Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, Sikhism, Buddhism. London is traditionally Protestant Christian. It's not Catholic. It's mainly Protestant. That's an example of Westminster Abbey, which is this main Protestant church that's inside the church. And these are examples of the other religious buildings in London. So we've got a Catholic cathedral, Buddhist temple, Jewish synagogue, a Hindu temple, an Islamic mosque, and a Sikh temple. So London is a place which caters to a lot of different religions. There are lots and lots of mosques. There are some areas where there aren't any churches, there are only mosques, because it depends on the communities that are living in the area. Schooling. Primary school is for aged 4 to 11, that's them. Secondary school 11 to 18, or you might go to a school which is 11 to 16 and then another school for 17 and 18. That's those guys there. That's my school, one I went to. Most schools require students to wear uniforms. There are private schools which are very expensive. They can be £11,000 per year. I'm not sure how much that is in pesos. And state schools which are free. Sometimes there are entrance exams for secondary schools, which are the ones between 11 and 18. You have to take an exam to get into them. Sometimes you can have scholarships to schools, so you can go to a private school for free if you are very good at music or at sport, if you have a skill in sport, for example. Lots of schools in London have a thing that's called a catchment area, so you can only go to a certain school if you live close to that school. Say you live in this part of London and you want to go to a school here, you can't. You can only go to schools around where you live in London. You have to go to a local school. You can't choose the school you go to. You automatically, directly go to a school near where you live. There are some very expensive schools in London, like this one. This is Westminster School. It's over £25,000 a year, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Most private schools are split into boys' schools and girls' schools. Most state schools, so free schools, are mixed, so boys and girls. There are hundreds of schools in London. Okay, universities. In London, there is the University of London, which has over 120,000 students, and it's made up of 19 different colleges. So this is a college, University College London. This is a college, London School of Economics. This is a college, Imperial College London. They're separate colleges which specialise in different skills. So, for example, at the London School of Economics, they teach economics, obviously, and at Imperial College, they teach science, so like medicine and physics and biology, that kind of thing. In England, in the United Kingdom, most students go somewhere different for university from the city where they've grown up. So I grew up in London, but I study at Cambridge University. I don't study in London. And that's very normal in England for students to travel to a different city to go to university. Students don't tend to live at home when they're at university. They don't live with their families. They live with their friends or in accommodation for students. Degrees do not lead directly to careers. So, for example, I study modern languages and literature, but when I leave university, I don't want to be a translator. So, although I'm studying French and Spanish and English literature, when I leave university, I want to do something different. And that's quite normal that people will study a general subject like English or languages or music, and then when they leave, they will specialise in their chosen career. For example, if you study music, you could end up being a teacher, you could end up working at a museum. You know, you don't necessarily have to do something related to the subject you've studied, which I think is quite different. I mean, I get the impression that in Chile, most people study what they then go on to work as. Or, of course, if you want to be a doctor, you have to study medicine. You know, you can't study languages, and then be a doctor. You have to study medicine to be a doctor because, you know, it'd be a bit dangerous otherwise. Law, engineering. There's over 145 universities in the United Kingdom. Sport. Okay, London's famous for its sport. Its football clubs, for example. You might recognise some of these: Arsenal, QPR, Chelsea. You heard of Chelsea yet? You might not recognise some of these. Crystal Palace? Yeah, have you heard of Crystal Palace? Have you heard of Dagenham?
Everybody plays FIFA.
Everyone plays football. These are the London clubs. This is Wembley Stadium. It's our national stadium in London. Rugby, it's a big sport in the UK. It's very popular. Do you play rugby in Chile?
Argentina.
So.
A little bit. Well, it's very, very popular in the UK. As everyone likes to tell you, they won the World Cup in 2003. They love rugby. Cricket. Do you know play cricket before? No. It's a bit like baseball, but it's kind of boring. Well, in my opinion, a cricket match can go on for 5 days. 5 days. It's it's a strange sport.
But in Asia, it's very popular.
It's very popular in the UK. I don't know why.
In Asia too.
Yeah. Tennis as well. We have the Wimbledon tournament every year in London, which is always really popular. If you ever get to go to London, you should go because it's one of the most amazing things you can see. Rowing as well. This is a picture of the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. So that's Cambridge, that's Oxford, the two sort of most famous universities in the United Kingdom. Every year on the River Thames in London, they have a rowing race. It always gets very competitive. I've been with my friends from Cambridge and walk there all the time and be like, whoa! You get very, very excited. And then last but not least, the 2012 Olympics. I know it's 2013, so some time has passed, but in London, we are all very proud of the 2012 Olympics because in England, we have a tendency to be very negative about something. So in England, everyone was saying before the Olympics, it's going to be bad, it's going to rain, there's going to be bombs. Like everyone was being very negative about the Olympics, and yet it was a great success and everyone really enjoyed it in the city. They enjoyed having the Olympics there. It was actually the 3rd time they've been to London. And these are just some pictures. I mean, did you watch the Olympics on television in 2012?
Yes.
Yeah? That was from the opening ceremony. This is obviously the different sports. That was the slightly strange logo. We're very proud. And they say that the legacy of the Olympics, so the effect that the Olympics has had in London, is amazing because it's brought in lots of tourism. It's brought in more development for sport, more money for sport and things like that, education for children about sport, that kind of thing. Culture in London, obviously like any big city, London is very multicultural, lots of culture there. You've got lots of theatres, you've got the opera, you've got concerts. This is a picture of the West End. The West End is a part of London where on just kind of 2 or 3 roads, there are hundreds of theatres. There's about 200 theatres in this space of like a square kilometre, which is the West End. And you can go and see lots of plays, but also musicals. So Les Miserables, the musical, a play where they also sing as well. And this is kind of one of the most popular tourist attractions in London for tourists to go to. Music in London. Okay, do you know who these people are?
Yeah.
Spice Girl.
Spice Girls. Do you know what? I'm surprised. When I was making this presentation, I thought, no, they won't know the Spice Girls, but everyone in Chile knows the Spice Girls. So these are people who come from London. So the Spice Girls, the Clash, they've got their very famous song, London's Calling. The Who, Led Zeppelin, Queen. Yeah, of course, everyone loves Queen.
Arctic Monkey.
Coldplay. Coldplay are British. Remember that, because some Americans think that Coldplay are American. They are not American. It makes me really angry. It's as if you had a famous Chilean musician, and everyone says, "Oh, he's from Argentina." You'd be like, "No, he's from Chile." They're British, they're from London, but people think they're American. So if anyone ever tells you, "Oh, they're American," you say, "No, Claire said they were British." Exactly, David Bowie, and of course, Rolling Stones. Yeah. Who's missing? What famous British band isn't here? Pink Floyd. Sorry, Pink Floyd, yeah. Do you know why? Do you know where Pink Floyd are from?
Cambridge.
They're from, Cambridge. Pink Floyd are from Cambridge. Also, who else is not here?
The Beatles.
Exactly, the Beatles, because they're from... Anyone know Liverpool? Exactly. Because somebody asked me, where's the Beatles? But they're not from London. So
Where's
I can't
Madness?
Yeah, so these are the most famous British bands from London. I mean, they're not all great, obviously the Spice Girls, questionable. But these are kind of the most famous exports. And in their songs, especially The Clash, they do sing about London and being in London. Coldplay too, they have a song called Primrose Hill. Primrose Hill is a place in London, and Coldplay have a song about it. Transport in London. In London, all public transport is managed by a government-run organisation, which is called Transport for London, helpfully named, or TfL. They're responsible for buses, boats, and of course, the London Underground, which is this. This is our metro. We call it the Tube because the Tube is a shape that's like that. That's a tube shape. So like that kind of shape, and that's the shape of the tunnels. So I mean, you can see here, the tunnels are very small and round in the tube. Not like the metro in Santiago, where the tunnels are huge, but in because they're so old in London, they're much, much smaller. It's the oldest underground railway in the world. It opened in 1863. That's the first journey on the tube. Can you see the hats? It's great. Yeah, it's known as a tube because of the tube-like shape of the tunnels. There are 287 stations and 11 lines. It serves 1.107 million passengers a year, and the track takes up 402 kilometres. The famous phrase is "mind the gap." So here, when they say like "Inicia, cierre las puertas," here on the metro, in London they say like "mind the gap," which means mind the gap between the train and the platform. There's a gap here, that's the gap. So it's mind the gap, don't fall when you come off the train, because sometimes the gap can be like that big. So you have to like jump to get off the train. Yeah, exactly. There's an average of 2.7 million tube journeys are made every day, and around 19,000 people are actually employed by the London Underground. Only 45% of the Underground is in tunnels, the rest is outside. That's the map. So you can see why when I came to Santiago and looked at the map, I was like, yes, this is not that difficult, because the tube in London is a bit complicated. And
Who is the Nicolas Massou station?
Sorry?
Who is the Nicolas Massou station?
Where?
Oh, the most popular one, you mean?
No, I remember when the Olympics game,
Oh, that's
the
it.
station changed the name.
Oh yeah, it's that Stratford. Where is it? This is Stratford, where the Olympics were, and before it was called something else, like Stratford East or Stratford West, and they just made it Stratford, so everyone knew where it was. This one here. This is where I live. So I actually live right at the end of the line, and my father, we get on the train every day here, and he goes all the way down the line to here. He works here. So he lives there, he works here. That journey is about, on a fast train in the morning, it's about 45 minutes. On a slow train, it's like an hour and a half. So it's a long journey. But a lot of people do that in London because it's so expensive to live in London, in central London, that most people can't afford it. So they have to live out here in these areas and then get the train in. The metro is also a lot more expensive in London, the tube, than it is in Santiago. It costs about 4 times the amount of a journey here. So a journey here is like 600 pesos. In London, it's like 4,000 pesos. It's a big difference. It's much, much more expensive. Yeah, that's my station, that's Chesham, where I live. So as you can see, it's not the city at all, it's basically countryside. It's got trees and it's outside, and it's very different from being in the centre. Okay, Royal London. Obviously, I can't do a presentation on London without talking about the royal family, because it's such a key part of the city's history. When you go around London, you will see so many signs of the monarchy which still exist in the city. For example, well, you won't see the Queen, but if you did see, that's what she looks like. The Queen is 84 now. She's been on the throne for 61 years. This is Buckingham Palace, obviously, and these are the guards, which every day they change the guard at Buckingham Palace, so they replace the old guard with the new guard, and there's music, and it's kind of a ceremony. Did you see it when you went to London? Yeah, it's one of the biggest attractions in the city. Do you know who they are? Anyone know who they are?
Kate Middleton.
Exactly, it's William and Kate. This is a picture from their wedding last year, about 3 years ago. The crown jewels. Royal buildings. So like I say, when you go around London, you'll see lots of buildings. So this is Buckingham Palace. It's where the Queen lives and the Duke of Edinburgh, her husband. This is St James's Palace. It's where Charles and his wife Camilla live. That's the Queen's son. This is Kensington Palace. That's where William and Kate live. And then these ones are historic. No one lives there anymore. They're more just museums now. The Tower of London, which is like really old, like thousands of years old. And Hampton Court, which is from the Tudor times, the times of sort of like the 1500s, like the time of like Elizabeth I and Henry VIII. I don't know how much you know about the British monarchy. These are all buildings which you can visit. In certain parts of the year they open, they're like museums, and members of the public and tourists can go and visit the building. Last summer, I worked in Buckingham Palace because it's like a museum. So I was there giving tour guides, being like, this is the throne room, this is the dining room, showing people around. Yeah, just some facts about the monarchy. She's been on the throne for 61 years, so that's the difference between when she began being queen and now. Last year was her 60th anniversary, her diamond anniversary, and there was great celebration across the UK, so you can see pictures of people celebrating the 60 years there as well. The monarchy costs 69 pence a year for every person in Britain. It's 100 pennies to a pound. So 69 pence is really not a lot of money, it's quite a small amount. And the Queen's image appears on all money and postage stamps. The Queen is thought to be worth around £300 million, which makes her the 257th richest person in the UK. So I found this fact quite surprising, because when you're a child, if someone says, who's the richest person in the UK, you always say, the Queen, but actually it's not true. Yeah, that's about the monarchy. And then, next thing. Okay, issues in London. So obviously, like any city, London isn't positive. There are obviously some negative aspects as well. 2011 saw some very violent riots around the city. I don't know if you saw this on the news or if you heard about it. But basically, thousands of people rioted in several London boroughs and in cities and towns across the whole of the UK, which caused fires, looting, chaos basically. The protest began as a result of a shooting of a young man from an area in London by the police, so kind of a case of police brutality against somebody. And then it just sort of exploded into this chaos across the city. It shocked everyone, and they were considered by a lot of people to represent like anger against kind of poverty and inequality and general problems with like social problems within the city. So that's quite a famous thing that happened a couple of years ago. You can see here that they set alight to a lot of buildings. They burned a lot of buildings with fire here. Yeah. London's also been the site of some terrorist attacks in the last few years. In 2005, we had the worst terrorist attack that we've had in the UK ever. And there were a number of bombs on the public transport, on the London Underground, on the buses, on trains. These are people that died. There were 52 people killed, and these are like memorials there. It kind of shocked the country a lot, because up until then, there hadn't really been an issue like that. And obviously, the underground and the buses are something that everyone uses every day. So can you imagine if there was a bomb on the metro? Obviously, it's very frightening for people, because they need to use the tube to get to work. And so it was quite a shock, and it was a big shock for London. And since then, things like security on public transport has been very, very high compared to before the attacks. And then student protests. You're probably quite used to this idea, because I know this happens in Santiago as well. But recent years have also seen a number of student protests because of the sharp increase in university fees. So university now is 3 times more expensive than it used to be. 3 years ago, it was £3,000 a year. So I pay for my course £3,000 a year. Now it's £9,000 a year. So it's gone from 3,000 to 9,000. My brother has to pay 9,000. And obviously that's a massive increase. And so there have been loads of students on the street protesting against the fees and everything. And that's been a big issue in London in recent years. Okay, however, don't want to end on a negative point. Despite these issues, London remains one of the most amazing places, well, I think, one of the best places to live in the world. It's very diverse, it's always changing, you can see a lot in one place. And although it's very expensive, people want to live there. So people pay how expensive it is because they want to live there, they want to be a part of something. These are just images of kind of the different things in London. You've got the parks and the city and House of Parliament. This is when they won the like when they got the Olympics to be their city. It's a great, great place to live. So yeah, example celebration. But yeah, so those are some images of London. That's me over. So a couple of questions, things to consider, things to think about. Are there any ways that you can see that London seems different? Life in London seems different from life in Santiago. What do you think? What differences are there between London and Santiago?
I don't know. I want to ask you, in the time that you are being in Santiago,
Yeah.
I don't know, 1 week, a month.
I've been here a month now.
Okay, and what do you think about Santiago and the difference between Santiago and London? Because I never have been in London.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, I find that I haven't visited everywhere in Santiago, so I've only seen some areas. So I've seen like Providencia and Ñuñoa and like the centre. So I've not really been everywhere yet. But I feel like it's, like I said, a lot more people live in the centre of Santiago than in London. In London, most people live kind of around the outskirts. They don't live in the centre. But, you know, there's apartment blocks here, like next to, not in the Plaza de Armas, but very close to here. There are apartments, people live there. That's a big difference for me. Obviously, it's a lot easier to get from one side of Santiago to the other because it takes up less geographical space. People tend to be quite helpful in Santiago. In London, people can be helpful, but not always. And then you're in a touristy area, then people are usually too busy to help you because they're going to work and they don't want to talk to you. When I get lost in Santiago, if I ask someone for directions, they're usually quite helpful. Like last week, I got lost and I asked this man, "Where's Puente?" And he walked with me all the way to Puente and was like, "Here's Puente." Great, thanks. It was brilliant. So I think people are quite helpful. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think, can you see from this presentation, have I mentioned anything that you think is similar to Santiago? Like, have I said anything about, I don't know, the price of living or the education? Like, are there any similarities you can see? I mean, did you like it when you went to London? Yeah?
Yes.
What did you like?
Park.
Yeah, the parks.
I
I think
lot
that's,
of park.
yeah.
They don't have a small like
Yeah.
here. I don't find homeless or
Homeless people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here
One guy told me that it was very dangerous because I paid him in cash next to the Tower Bridge.
Right.
He was selling like a big hippie guy with a beard selling second-hand books, and I paid him with cash, a book for a book, and he said, "No, hide that because this area, it's a very dangerous area." But it's like that you don't live in London, you know. You don't
Yeah.
know where
I
it comes
think it's
from.
the same with Santiago though. Like people have said to me when I got here, people said, "Oh, be careful of your bag, and don't get money out, and take off your jewelry." And people were like said that to me, but I haven't had any problems. But it's the same when I'm in London. Like I don't walk around with my iPhone like in the middle of the street at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like I don't get out my money and start waving it around. You obviously have to be cautious when you're in a big city.
Yeah, but you were talking about the density because this guy was talking to me. He was very nice, but I was looking around and there was nobody in miles around. So it's like who's gonna drop from the sky or something to mug me, you know? So
I mean,
I'm used to the density here in Santiago.
Yeah, I mean here it is striking how different it is. Like in London, if you go to the main shopping street, Oxford Street, where all the shops are, there's loads of people. But in other parts of the city, sometimes you can be walking down a street and there aren't very many people. In Santiago, there's always people. There's always like people around.
But if you go to the suburbs, there's nobody on the streets.
Yeah, I guess it's the same.
Mm.
I mean, I noticed what you said about parks. Like, I miss the parks in London. In London, there's like so many massive parks. Sometimes you can think you're in the countryside, even though you're in the middle of the city. Like Hyde Park is huge. Hyde Park is like the size of the park here, the Metropolitan Park. But like in the middle of the city, it's absolutely massive. So yeah. Do you think you'd like to live in a city like London, or at least visit a city like London? Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive.
Ask. Do you drive car?
I can drive, but I don't drive in London.
Okay. What do you feel in Santiago that the cars drive from the right and not in the left?
Yeah, it's a bit surprising. The most dangerous thing is when you cross the street. So, like in England, when you cross the street, you look left, but here you have to look. You know what I mean? Because they're coming in a different
That's the
direction.
scariest thing
You
that
don't
happens
expect
to
it.
you when you're in the UK.
No, also, the problem with cars in Chile, my problem with cars in Chile, is that, you know, at crossing, when it's green, you cross, but the cars are allowed to turn. So, you know, so these cars stop, but then cars coming that way are allowed to turn onto your road. So you're walking on the crossing, or someone's a car, you're like, what are you doing? Why are you turning onto where I'm walking? Do you see what I mean? In England, all the cars stop. No one's allowed to turn when you're walking. They have to stop. But here, some stop, others just keep going. It can be a bit unnerving sometimes. Also, in London, people don't beep. You know, don't do it in London. They just don't. I mean, a little bit. But it's considered very rude, and it's considered you only do it in an emergency. So, like, you're going to die, beep! But, like, in Chile, beep, 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 all the time. So, honestly, so much more. I mean, I don't really have a problem because I've got dark hair, but my best friend here is blonde, like Rubia. In the road all the time. Rubia, gringa, ven conmigo, Rubia. And it's quite funny. Like, the first time it's really funny. The second time it's like, the third time it's like, what? What do you want? Like, so I think that's a big difference that I've noticed in the street. Like in London, people don't tend to shout at you in the street. It's considered very like, don't do it. I've had it a bit more here. Sometimes I think it's quite funny.
And there are no dogs barking.
No, there are no dogs. They don't have stray dogs. All the stray dogs get taken away to a pound. I don't know what it, you know, like if someone sees a stray dog, the police come and take the stray dogs away. They don't have stray dogs in the city.
That's so great.
Can you think of like positive aspects of living in a city like London as opposed to, you know, things that might be better there or things that might be worse?
Well, you can find different culture and language.
Yeah.
But you live in Cambridge?
During term time, so when I'm at university, I live in Cambridge, but in the holidays, I live at home. So I'm in Cambridge just like from October until December, and then at home, and then from February until April in Cambridge, and then at home for the summer. So, you know.
Because one of the problems of Santiago is that people don't go outside Santiago to study, you know.
Yeah.
So everybody stays here, you know.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is that, like your family, many people live in the suburbs, very far from their jobs, you know. So that's the problem in London and Santiago. You know, if you can't live downtown. Well, in London, here you can, but many people want to live in a big house.
Yeah.
So if you want to live downtown, you have to live in an apartment. But you can, at least if you don't want to commute, you know, so much, you know. So that's very similar. I guess.
In London, rain all the year. No, because everybody says no. London rains every year.
Okay, it rains more than in Chile. It rains more than in Santiago, but it doesn't rain every day. What it is that it's usually quite grey. Like you don't see the sun, so it's cloudy, but it's not actually raining. Like, you know, sometimes it will rain, but it never rains continuously for like weeks and weeks and weeks. It will rain a bit and then it will stop, and then it will rain a bit and then it will stop. We have showers. You call it shower when it rains a little bit and then stops, no rain, and then stops, and that's very English. That happens all the time.
If you happen to go to the south, for example, Concepcion, Valdivia,
Yeah.
that's similar to the UK. You know,
Yeah.
the humidity. You know, the green stuff is similar to the south.
It definitely rains more than here. Like I think since I've been here a month, and I think it's rained twice. And I remember the first time it rained, I was like, oh, it does rain in Chile, because I've been thinking it just never rained here because I hadn't seen any rain
But it
yet.
rains less and less each year.
Yeah.
Questions. Puta, yo quiero preguntar harto, pero quiero ser el único. Yeah. A question. In UK, are earthquakes or the move the earth moves?
Yeah,
Are
earthquakes.
there-
No, it doesn't
No?
really happen.
Do you feel the last day?
No, I haven't experienced
and yeah, el otro día, en la noche tembló.
In England,
En la mañana tembló.
last week in a city in England, there was a tiny earthquake, like very, very small, and it made the national news because it's so unusual. People are like, there's an earthquake, because it never ever happens normally, and then in Chile it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
I'm a bit scared because I've never lived, I've never been in an earthquake. What do you do if there's an earthquake? What do you do?
Just stay there. You know.
Run.
Yeah,
I'm a bit worried.
some people
Before-
stay there.
Go under the door,
Under
Yeah.
the table.
the doorway.
It's not something I'm looking forward